I used to think the dangerous moment was the first time Maya Collins walked into my apartment. I was wrong. The dangerous moment came weeks later, when I looked up from chopping onions and realized I could no longer remember when her presence had stopped feeling like a visit. "You're doing it again," Maya said from behind me. "Doing what?" "Pretending you didn't expect me." I kept my attention on the cutting board, although the smile threatening the corner of my mouth made dignity difficult. "You arrived without an invitation. Claire, there were 2 wine glasses on the counter before I knocked. I own several wine glasses. And 2 plates. I believe in preparedness." Maya laughed, that warm, unguarded laugh that had somehow become as familiar as the hum of my refrigerator. When I finally turned, she was already opening the cabinet above the coffee maker and reaching for the blue ceramic mug she always used. She didn't ask where it was. She hadn't asked in weeks. Her jacket hung over my dining chair, her phone charger remained plugged into the outlet beside my sofa, and the speaker near the bookshelf was playing a song from the playlist she had made for me. I knew every word now. I would have denied that under oath. "You know," Maya said, filling her mug with hot water, "most people just admit when they enjoy someone's company. Most people have lower standards for conversation. And yet you keep feeding me. That's because watching you cook is stressful." She smiled over the rim of the mug. There was nothing extraordinary about the evening. That was precisely what made it extraordinary. 6 months earlier, I had considered my apartment successful because nothing happened inside it without my permission. Everything had its place. Every evening had a shape I understood. Now Maya sat on my kitchen counter stealing roasted peppers from the serving dish while changing the song on my speaker without asking, and somehow none of it felt like disorder. It felt lived in. She reached for another pepper. I tapped her hand lightly with the wooden spoon. "Dinner is in 10 minutes. I'm starving." "You said that 20 minutes ago." "I've remained consistent. A rare achievement." She grinned, then hopped down from the counter and moved behind me toward the silverware drawer. Her hand touched my back for barely a second as she passed. "Sorry," she murmured. "Tiny kitchen. Perfectly adequate kitchen. For 1 person." I should have answered immediately. Usually I did. Instead, I became strangely aware of the place where her hand had been, of how close she was standing, of the music filling the room and the second plate waiting beside mine. Maya glanced at me, curious but unsuspecting, then carried the silverware to the table. I told myself the pause meant nothing. What I did not understand yet was that friendship had already begun asking me questions I was running out of ways to answer. Dinner should have made things easier. It usually did. Maya had a talent for turning ordinary meals into conversations that wandered so far from their starting point that neither of us could remember how we got there. That evening we moved from terrible office coffee to childhood vacations, then somehow to whether people who arranged books by color could be trusted. "Absolutely not," I said. "That is not organization. That is decoration pretending to be organization." Maya leaned across the table, laughing. "You have very strong feelings about imaginary bookshelves. Standards are important. I am beginning to understand why your spice cabinet looks like it could pass a military inspection. And yet you always know where the cinnamon is." She opened her mouth, considered that, then pointed her fork at me. "That proves nothing." After dinner, we carried the dishes into the kitchen together. I was rinsing a plate when Maya came up behind me to reach the cabinet above my shoulder. "Excuse me," she said, placing one hand lightly against my upper arm as she leaned past. The contact was brief, practical, almost thoughtless. My awareness of it was none of those things. I stepped aside too quickly and nearly bumped the counter. Maya lowered the plate. "You all right?" "Perfectly." That sounded convincing. "I am holding a wet plate. There are limits to how dramatic this situation can become." She smiled and let it go. I was grateful. A minute later we both reached for the dish towel. Our hands met. Neither of us pulled away immediately. It was probably 1 second. Perhaps 2. Long enough for the room to become strangely precise. I noticed the quiet song playing behind us. The faint scent of rosemary from dinner. Maya's eyes moving from our hands to my face. She was close enough that I could see tiny flecks of amber around her pupils. I had looked into those eyes countless times. Apparently I had never looked quite this carefully. Something shifted in Maya's expression too, subtle enough that I could not name it. Curiosity, perhaps. Awareness. Then one corner of her mouth lifted. If you feel that strongly about drying dishes, I am willing to surrender. I released the towel. You were the one reaching for it. I was trying to help. Your help has eaten half my roasted peppers. And yet morale remains high. I laughed and the moment loosened, but it did not disappear. Later, while Maya was putting on her coat, I noticed the collar had folded beneath itself. Wait. She stopped. Without thinking, I stepped forward and straightened it. My fingertips brushed a loose strand of hair from the fabric near her shoulder. Maya went still. So did I. For one suspended beat, neither of us made a joke. Her face was only inches from mine. Her expression unexpectedly quiet. I became aware of my breathing because it had changed. Then Maya glanced down at my coat and said softly, "Yours looks suspicious too." I stepped back. "It does not." Her smile returned. "Worth a try." After she left, I stood in the kitchen telling myself that wine, fatigue, and Maya's complete disregard for personal space explained everything. It was an excellent explanation. The only problem was that I was beginning not to believe it. For the next few days, I became unusually skilled at noticing Maya without admitting that I was noticing her. I noticed when she wore her hair up instead of loose. I noticed when she sounded tired before she admitted she was tired. I noticed that she had begun leaving the last inch of wine in her glass because she knew I disliked opening another bottle unnecessarily. None of this concerned me until Friday evening, when Maya convinced me to join her at a small neighborhood bar where one of her friends was playing acoustic music. The room was warm and crowded, with amber lights hanging above mismatched tables and conversations blending beneath the guitar. Maya belonged there effortlessly. She greeted people, remembered names, laughed with a group near the stage, and moved through the room with the easy confidence of someone who had never considered standing quietly near the exit a legitimate social strategy. I watched her from our table and felt something I could not immediately identify. She looked younger there. Not childish. Never that. Simply 32 in a way that our quiet evenings together had allowed me to forget. During the break, someone nearby mentioned seeing the same musician perform a cover of an old song years earlier. "I saw the original band play that in 1994, I said. Maya turned toward me. "Seriously?" "Yes." "Why?" She smiled. "I was born in 1994. For a moment the noise around us seemed to recede. I had always known there were 24 years between us. Numbers, however, are wonderfully abstract until someone gives them a memory. When Maya was learning to walk, I had already finished college. I had already worked my first real job, signed my first lease, made mistakes I now remembered as belonging to another lifetime. I looked around at the people near Maya's age and suddenly saw not a number but 2 different stretches of road. "You disappeared," Maya said. "What?" "You were here, and then you went somewhere." "I was doing arithmetic." "At a bar? That sounds like you." I gave her a dry look. I was thinking about the age difference. She did not rush to reassure me. I appreciated that more than I expected. "Okay," she said. "That is all. Claire, I know you are 56. I am aware." "Good." I was worried this would be difficult news. I laughed despite myself. Then her expression softened. "I know how old you are. I also know who I am sitting with." That should have settled something. Instead, it made the question more complicated. On the walk home, Maya mentioned that a woman from work named Sophie had invited her out with several co-workers the following evening. "You should go," I said. "I probably will." Something tightened unexpectedly beneath my ribs. Small, immediate, unreasonable. "Good," I replied. Maya glanced sideways at me. "You said that like you were approving a mortgage application." I said it normally. "Of course you did." She smiled and kept walking. I did too, irritated by a feeling I had no right to possess. Maya was my friend. Her Saturday night had nothing to do with me. I repeated that to myself all the way home. The troubling part was how much repeating it seemed to require. Saturday evening arrived with the irritating punctuality of something I had decided not to care about. 7 I made dinner for one. At 7:30, I poured a glass of wine and opened the novel I had been meaning to finish for nearly a month. At 8 I realized I had read the same paragraph 4 times. None of this had anything to do with Maya. I was simply distracted. That was the explanation I chose, and for almost 6 minutes I found it convincing. Then I caught myself listening for footsteps in the hallway. I closed the book. Maya was out with coworkers. Sophie was one of those coworkers. There was nothing remarkable about that information, except that my mind had preserved Sophie's name with the efficiency usually reserved for passwords and tax deadlines. I stood and went to the kitchen. Maya's blue mug was on the second shelf. Her preferred wine glass was beside mine. A jar of chili oil she had insisted would improve my cooking sat near the stove, despite the fact that my cooking had survived perfectly well for decades without Maya Collins supervising it. Evidence of her was everywhere once I started looking. I reached for the speaker, intending to put on her playlist, then stopped. Somehow listening to music Maya had chosen while Maya was somewhere else felt embarrassingly close to admitting I missed her. I selected one of my own albums instead. It lasted 12 minutes before I turned it off. The silence was worse. At 8:43 my phone lit up. Maya had sent a photograph of a cappuccino with a foam design collapsing into an unidentifiable white shape. Her message read, "Sophie insists this is a swan. I need an impartial ruling." I stared at the name first. Then I became annoyed with myself for staring at the name. I studied the photograph with unnecessary seriousness and typed, "It looks medically concerning." Her reply arrived almost immediately. "I knew I could trust your judgment." I smiled before I could stop myself. That should have been the end of it. Instead, I wondered where she was sitting, whether Sophie was beside her, whether Maya was laughing at something she had said. The questions appeared so naturally that it took me several seconds to recognize how inappropriate they were. I had no claim on Maya's evening. I had no reason to want one. Friendship did not require an accounting of Saturday nights. "You dislike changes in routine," I told myself aloud. It sounded sensible until I remembered there had been no routine at all before Maya created one with me. The following afternoon she knocked on my door carrying a paper bag from the bakery downstairs. "Peace offering," she announced. "For what?" "Abandoning you last night." My heart gave one stupid, hopeful beat before Maya smiled. "I am kidding, Claire." "Obviously." I stepped aside to let her in. She walked straight to the kitchen, found 2 plates without asking, and began unpacking pastries as though Saturday had changed nothing. I watched her move through my apartment with effortless familiarity, and felt relief spread through me so quickly that I finally had to face the question I had been avoiding. If Maya spending one evening elsewhere could make her return feel this good, what exactly had I begun expecting from her? By Tuesday evening I had almost convinced myself that Saturday had been an anomaly, a small emotional miscalculation caused by habit, and too much time alone with my thoughts. Then Maya arrived looking tired, and every careful explanation I had constructed became less useful. She did not bounce into the apartment or immediately criticize my music. She slipped off her shoes, set her bag beside the sofa, and stood in the kitchen doorway as though she had used most of her energy getting there. "Long day?" I asked. "Very. Bad." Maya considered it. "No. Just too many people needing too many things at the same time." I understood that distinction. Without asking, I poured her a glass of wine. She watched me place it beside her blue mug. "You know, I could get used to this." Something about the sentence caught me off guard. "Do not," I said lightly. "My hospitality has strict limits." "I have seen no evidence of that." She smiled, tired but genuine, and the tension inside me loosened. We ate on the sofa because neither of us had the energy to pretend the dining table was necessary. Maya chose a movie. I objected to her choice on principle, then watched it anyway. Her usual corner of the sofa seemed to have become hers without discussion. My usual place had shifted slightly closer over the past few weeks, also without discussion. Halfway through the movie, Maya tucked her feet beneath herself and leaned against the cushions. Her shoulder brushed mine when she adjusted the blanket beside her. Neither of us mentioned it. A few minutes later she laughed at something on the screen and turned toward me, still smiling. I turned at the same moment. We were closer than I expected. Her laughter faded, not abruptly but softly, as if both of us had become aware of the same silence. I noticed her eyes first, then the loose strand of hair near her cheek, then the fact that I was noticing any of it. Maya held my gaze for another second before looking back at the television. You missed the important part, she said. I was watching. Not the movie. I looked at her. She smiled without turning her head. You looked distracted. I was thinking. Naturally. The humor saved me again. It always seemed to arrive just before I had to understand something. An hour later the movie was still playing, but Maya had stopped commenting on it. Her head rested against the back of the sofa, her eyes closed. Maya. I am awake. You have not moved in 10 minutes. Very focused. On what? There was no answer. I waited. Her breathing had changed, slower and deeper, and the small line that sometimes appeared between her eyebrows had disappeared. Maya Collins, who seemed constitutionally incapable of being still, had fallen asleep beside me. I lowered the television until the voices became little more than murmurs. The apartment settled around us. The wineglasses remained on the coffee table. Her shoes waited by the door. The blue mug sat in the kitchen. Music from her playlist played so quietly I could barely hear it. I should have woken her. Instead, I sat there listening to her breathe and realized something far more unsettling than jealousy or arithmetic. I liked having her here even when she was giving me nothing at all. No conversation. No laughter. No attention. Just Maya asleep in the room, and somehow that was enough. I stayed still for another minute, as if moving might disturb something larger than Maya's sleep. Then I noticed the way her arms had folded loosely across herself. The apartment was warm, but the night beyond the windows had turned cold, and I remembered the folded blanket over the armchair. I stood carefully, crossed the room and picked it up. The memory came before I could stop it. Another evening, another sofa, waking to find a blanket over me that I had not put there. Maya had never mentioned doing it. She had simply noticed what I needed while I was asleep and taken care of it. I unfolded the blanket and laid it gently over her. She shifted beneath it, releasing a quiet breath, but did not wake. I pulled the edge higher over her shoulder. My hand rested on the fabric for a moment. There was no reason to remain there. I knew that. Still, I sat on the edge of the coffee table instead of returning to my place. Without conversation, Maya looked different. Not younger. Not older. Simply unguarded. The energy that usually seemed to surround her had gone quiet. A strand of hair had fallen across her cheek. Her hand rested open beside her. Fingers relaxed against the blanket. I watched the slow rhythm of her breathing and felt something inside me become painfully still. I had spent years believing intimacy announced itself through declarations and decisions. Perhaps that was why I had failed to recognize this version of it. A blue mug in my cabinet. 2 plates without discussion. Knowing when she was tired. Lowering the television because she had fallen asleep. Wanting her to be comfortable in a room that had once belonged only to me. The strand of hair shifted slightly when Maya breathed. Before I had decided anything, my hand lifted. I stopped halfway. There were only a few inches between my fingers and her face. I could have moved the hair aside. It would have been harmless. Thoughtful even. Except I knew that was not why my hand was there. I wanted to touch her. The realization arrived without drama, which somehow made it harder to escape. I wanted the small intimacy of brushing that strand away. I wanted to know what it would feel like to let my fingertips rest against her cheek for one quiet second. Not because she needed anything. Not because I was helping. Simply because it was Maya. My hand dropped immediately. I stood too quickly and bumped my knee against the coffee table. Maya stirred. Claire. Her voice was soft with sleep. Everything is fine. She blinked at me, then looked down at the blanket. A sleepy smile appeared. You covered me up. You looked cold. I was asleep. Sleeping people still get cold. She smiled again, and this time I had to look away. Thank you. I folded my arms across myself, suddenly needing the distance. You should probably get some sleep at home. Maya studied me for a moment, confused by the change she could not possibly understand. Okay. I walked her to the door. After she left, I returned to the sofa and stared at the place where she had been. The blanket still held the shape of her. For the first time, I could not blame the wine, the narrow kitchen, or an accidental touch. Nothing had happened. That was precisely the problem. I had wanted something too. The next morning, Maya sent me a message at 8:12. Coffee later? I saw it almost immediately. I answered 53 minutes later. Busy today. Another time. The lie was small enough to look respectable. That became my method. I did not disappear. I did not become cruel. I simply began inserting inches where there had been none. When Maya sent me a photograph that would normally have earned an immediate sarcastic response, I waited an hour. When she asked whether I wanted dinner, I claimed I had already eaten. When I heard her door open across the hall, I stopped finding reasons to leave my apartment at exactly the same time. I called it perspective. Then I called it caution. Anything sounded better than fear. 2 evenings later, 3 familiar knocks came through my door. I was standing less than 10 feet away. My body recognized Maya before my mind had formed her name. I looked toward the door and did nothing. Another knock. Claire. I closed my eyes. There had been a time when that door protected the quiet I valued. Then Maya had crossed it so often that opening it had become almost automatic. Now I stood behind it trying to rebuild a boundary I had already taught both of us not to need. I waited 15 seconds before opening. Maya stood there holding a bottle of wine. Hi. Hello. Her eyes moved over my face. Bad time. A little. I have some work to finish. Oh. She lowered the bottle slightly. I thought maybe we could order something. For one dangerous second I wanted to step aside. I could already see the evening. Her shoes by the door, her blue mug on the counter, music playing while we argued about takeout. The wanting frightened me more than the invitation. Not tonight, I said. Maya nodded. Sure. I am sorry. Do not be. I should have asked first. She gave me a polite smile. Maya had never needed to ask before. Good night, Claire. Good night. I closed the door gently and stood there listening until her footsteps reached the apartment on the other side of the wall. Her door shut. Silence returned. I had wanted silence. I had built an entire life around it. I went to the kitchen, poured 1 glass of wine, and opened a book. After several pages, I realized I had retained nothing. On the second shelf, Maya's blue mug sat untouched. I looked toward the speaker. Her playlist was still queued from the night she had fallen asleep. I could not bring myself to press play. The music would make me think of her, as though I had managed to think of anything else. So I sat with my book, my wine, and the careful quiet I had spent years perfecting. Everything was exactly where it belonged. The sofa was empty. The kitchen was orderly. No one was stealing food from the serving dish or changing my music or laughing from the next room. I had successfully restored my old life in less than a week. The problem was that it no longer felt like mine. For the first time, I understood that I was not removing Maya from my routine. I was removing her from places I had willingly made room for her, and every empty place seemed to remember. For several days, Maya gave me exactly what I had been pretending to want. She stopped knocking. She did not ask about dinner. Her messages became occasional and uncomplicated, the kind one friend could send another without expecting anything in return. I should have been relieved. Instead, I discovered that distance has a sound. It was the absence of 3 knocks at 7 in the evening. It was music faintly passing through the wall instead of playing from my own speaker. It was my refrigerator humming while I ate alone at the kitchen counter. On Thursday morning, I met Maya in the hallway. She was carrying groceries in both arms, and instinct made me take half a step toward her before fear stopped me. Morning, she said. Good morning. Her voice was pleasant. Mine was painfully polite. How have you been? Busy. There was that word again. Maya nodded. Right. Normally I would have taken one of the bags. Normally she would have handed it over without asking. Instead, we stood 6 feet apart like neighbors who knew each other only well enough to exchange holiday cards. And you? I asked. I am fine. She adjusted the bag against her hip. Good. Good. I hated every second of it. Maya looked at me for a moment, and something in her expression made my carefully constructed distance feel less like protection and more like injury. I will see you around, Claire. Of course. She walked past me. I almost called her name. I did not. That evening, I tried to solve the problem as though it were one of the practical decisions I had spent my adult life making. Maya was a woman. I had never imagined myself wanting a woman. Maya was 32. I was 56. 24 years was not a detail I could erase simply because I enjoyed her company. Perhaps I was lonely. Perhaps months of dinners and conversations had created dependence where there had once been independence. Perhaps I had mistaken being understood for attraction. Each explanation was reasonable until I tested it against the evidence. Loneliness did not explain why Sophie's name had bothered me. Habit did not explain why Maya standing close could alter my breathing. Friendship did not explain the moment beside the sofa. I closed my eyes and saw my own hand again, suspended a few inches from Maya's sleeping face. That memory refused every argument I offered it. I had wanted to touch her. Not because she needed comfort. Not because there was a practical reason. Because she was Maya, and for one unguarded moment, being near her had not felt like enough. I opened my eyes. Across the room her blue mug remained untouched. I had not played her playlist all week. I had restored the silence I once considered peace, yet now it felt like something missing rather than something protected. A question formed before I could push it away. If this was not simply friendship, what was it? I did not need a label for myself that night. I did not need to rewrite 56 years in a single sentence. But for the first time, I understood that those questions were not the same as the one that frightened me. The frightening question was much smaller, much more immediate, and impossible to answer with theory. What did I feel for Maya? Somewhere beyond the wall, her music stopped. The sudden quiet made me look up. And I knew, with a clarity I did not yet have the courage to accept, that whatever the answer was, I had already begun changing my life to avoid it. The next evening Maya knocked once. Not 3 times. One firm knock followed by silence. I knew it was her before I opened the door. She stood in the hallway with her hands tucked into her coat pockets, and for the first time in months, she did not assume she was welcome inside. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Of course." I stepped aside. Maya entered, but she stayed near the door. She did not take off her coat. Did I do something? No, my answer came too quickly. Then I need you to help me understand why you suddenly stopped letting me into your life. I have been busy. Maya held my gaze. Claire. One word, and every reasonable excuse I had prepared became embarrassing. I needed some space. I gave you space. I know. I stopped knocking. I stopped asking you to dinner. I stopped assuming I could come over. Her voice remained calm, which somehow made the hurt beneath it clearer. I can respect a boundary. I just need to know when one exists. You did nothing wrong. Then what changed? I folded my arms. Things became too close. Maya glanced around the apartment at the sofa, the kitchen, the blue mug still sitting untouched on its shelf. We were already close. I know. So what changed? I looked away. There is the age difference. There always was. 24 years matters. I did not say it does not. We are at different points in our lives. Maybe we are. She paused. But you are deciding what that means for me without asking me. I had no answer. And this is not only about age, she said quietly. Is it? My throat tightened. I have never had to think about myself this way before. Maya did not finish the thought for me. She did not offer a label or try to make the uncertainty easier. She simply waited. I do not know what any of this means, I said. I am not asking you to. Then what are you asking? Why you are shutting me out? I looked at the closed door behind her. I am not afraid of you. Maya's expression softened. I never said you were. The room became painfully still. Then she asked, what exactly are you afraid of, Claire? Every answer I had rehearsed rose at once. Her age. My age. The future. The past. The possibility of ruining something precious. But then I saw the blanket over the chair, the silent speaker, the blue mug, and my own hand suspended inches from Maya's sleeping face. I remembered waiting for her, missing her, wanting her near me, and then building distance because wanting had become impossible to ignore. Maya did not demand an answer. After a moment, she quietly said goodnight and left. The door closed between us. I stood there listening to her footsteps disappear, and finally understood what I had spent days refusing to name. Friendship was no longer enough to explain what I felt for Maya. I was not running because I wanted her farther away. I was running because I had begun to understand how much I wanted her to stay. Thank you for staying with Claire and Maya through this part of their story. If their journey has meant something to you, please subscribe to the channel and share this story with someone who might want to follow where they go next.